Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We are starting a new theme as we do on Mondays. This week we're looking at positive confusion. Songs that make you think, what did I just listen to? Can I have another, please? We're going to start off with the band The Garden with the track A Struggle. I'm already a little on edge here. The thumbnail, the name of the band, The Garden. Let's dive into this and see what's going on with this group.
A struggle, if you wanna call it that. Ain't the first step bubble, but it is that. If you think for a second now, I'll shift my gears, then you did wrong. A struggle, if you wanna call it that. Ain't the first step bubble, but it is that. If you think for a second now, I'll shift my gears.
So this is the chorus, and our two verses have been wildly different. So this is our intro, but a variation on it. What? Yeah, that fits the theme. Um, I, th- I think a lot of what we're gonna get this week is going to fall in line with this. Where I'm kind of at a loss for words because of a lack of cohesion. right? If it was more cohesive, it wouldn't be as confusing. They're kind of opposites. To make sense of something would require order, and if something is going to be difficult to classify, it needs to be chaotic. Um, I guess we're just gonna fall into this and see where my mind takes me because right now all I have is a surface level read of the literal ideas that were presented in the track. Um, that's as far as my brain's got right now. So let's start with that and see where that takes us. Where do I even begin with this? There are four different ideas here. We have the screamy, thrashy, hardcore idea that we have at the beginning. Um, we have a pop punk section that I thought was a bridge possibly, and then it turned into maybe a verse, and then we revisited it in our outro. So I'm not even sure what to call the section. And we have a super chill idea that is interspaced, dividing up our hardcore screamy moment. And then there's like a chiller bass and drum idea that we saw in our first verse, maybe. It's just it's all over the place. I think the most interesting thing I can really take away from this is, yeah, instrumental roles, which I think was pretty neat. Okay, so like the point of this week is confusion. I think stumping me is like the ultimate goal with these suggestions. The song starts out and it's blast beats, double bass kicks, and something in the higher range. I was trying to find it in the video. All I saw was drum and bass, and the bassist wasn't playing, but the drummer wasn't always playing either. Eventually, though, we had a synth, and I'm wondering if the bass, they're using an octave pedal with it, or if the synth had some sort of uh, electric guitar sound going on there. Either way, lots of noise, higher range tones, making noise with the drums making noise and screaming, just lots of noisy components. But we offset that with this sort of dreary, laid back, slurring vocal line, very comfortable, almost spoken word. There isn't, there wasn't really like a sung element to it. It was sing-songy for sure, but not singing in like the most rigid definition of that. With this meandering bass line. And so we go from noise to simplicity, to layered noise to simplicity. And so far, everything is texture based. We get into the first, what I still think is maybe the verse, and the bass has taken over as a melodic component that runs, well, it's a chordal component based on single notes. Sort of like walking the bass line, but not doing a walking bass line. I don't think it was arpeggiating either, so I don't remember why I thought the bass was doing chordal stuff, but it wasn't just sitting still on a single note. And we had a vocal above that doing a melody line. Drums laid back and went into something metronomic. It had a little bit of kick to it. It wasn't completely dull, had a little bit of spice, but it was primarily there to dictate the rhythm and pulse of the song. So we went from purely textural to very functional. In fact, very traditionally functional. We have harmony, melody, and rhythm. We go back to the textural writing, right? And from here, we move into a new section, which I still kind of classify as verse 2, but also came up in the outro. So, again, I'm not really sure with this. This was punky, right? We had that in the snare bass idea. Just very forward momentous. The vocals were no longer dreary or screamed, they were energetically sung. Um, we had bass and synth here. And this was more traditionally written as a rock track. Punk, of course, but still under that rock umbrella. And then we just started to cycle through all these with variations on them. We went back to the screaming bit that alternated between the bass and dreary vocal, but we also had more synth work here. The bass was present in the hardcore section. We had a synth line in the vocal and bass section. We got back to the punk section and we had another melodic instrument line in it that wasn't there before. There was probably a revisit of another section. I honestly don't know. This song was a lot. But it was really interesting that it was fairly consistent, that they introduced us to the variety, right? And then when they brought these sections back later, they introduced variations on them. And I think that's really key because they could have not done that and the song would have been fine. It already has plenty of contrast to it. We don't necessarily need to contrast when we revisit a section, but they went that extra step and they said, you know what, if we're going to bring something back, you're going to hear something different with it, even if we're only going to be in that section for 12 seconds. And I really have to appreciate that notion of never doing the same thing exactly twice. Um, and so this brings up sort of a bit of a performative side to this. I'm curious how the synth gets performed. There's only two members here, and there are usually at times three instruments being played. That synthesizer does not seem to have somebody on it. But what I find really interesting is, at least in our duo, they alternate and trade off vocal roles. We have seemingly a screamer and a singer, and quite interestingly, they also both play instruments. This is a very minimalistic band. Um, and I think through that, we can actually get a little bit of insight into the music as well. Like I had mentioned, there really aren't many layers going on. We usually have a vocalist and one or two instruments. Occasionally, we do have all three. We do have our synth present at times. But for the most part, despite the overwhelming lots ofness. That's a new word, lots ofness. The overwhelming variety we have with different sections. The sections themselves are pretty uh, contained. They're pretty minimalist. It typically is a vocalist with one or two instruments. In fact, there's a lot of situations where it's a vocalist and one instrument. We had right there at the beginning, alternating with the hardcore bit, the sung vocals with the bass only. Interestingly, on the performative side, that's the same person. The other person does not do anything for that bar or two bar interlude between the screaming sections, which, if I remember correctly, didn't have bass in them. They were just screaming and drums, which again are the same person. They're basically trading off their own skills, taking two bars to do their thing and then two bars to do their thing, which is a really interesting perspective as well, because when we take it from that performative aspect and we look at the punk section, or even the chill, laid back bass drums and vocal section, these are parts that come immediately after the trade-off section and bring it all together. So it's like one person does their thing, We go back and forth a little bit, and we come together and we make something with both performers. That is something I would not have got without the music video. And I don't think it adds too much to it, but I do think it sort of explains a bit of the maximalist minimalism that's going on, where we frequently are changing between different things. There are four drastically different sounds in here that take you from super highs, where we start being screamed out, just smashing a drum set, and our lows, which is just a dreary vocal and a bass hitting a couple of notes here and there. It's quite minimalistic in its own. But each of these sections tend to only include two to three instruments, two to three voices. And so the sections themselves are hyper minimalist, not in minimalistic art, but just not having a lot of components to them. So they find a maximalistic approach to this to make it sound like there's a lot by switching things up drastically with massive dynamic swings, which is fascinating. If they were to extrapolate on any of these ideas singularly and explore just a single track of it, I would probably be a bit disconnected analytically around the midpoint. I'm not going to say there's a lot of meat on the bones of some of these ideas. They can certainly be expanded upon, but given that they're only going to have two to three instruments going on at any specific time, as long as they keep the sections thematically relevant, I don't know that there's a lot that they can do to keep things interesting from moment to moment within what appears to be their uh, their their chops, right? What their ability is to perform. Um, we have seen some stripped down 2 and 3 member bands do some wild stuff and explore a lot of different sounds, but it also, I mean, like Terra Melos, right? That we just checked out last week or something like that. I'll put the link right up there for you. They are a wildly talented trio who can create a ton of different sounds and take us in so many different directions, but it also is a very, a very niche skill that they have of utilizing a ton of effects pedals and stuff. And they're also exceptionally skilled on their instruments, just, ability to play notes quickly or in different rhythms and stuff like that. I'm not saying that the Garden don't have chops, that they can't play more intricate or complex stuff, but given what I heard here, they tend to err more towards simplistic writing. So, like I said, if they were to extrapolate any one of these single ideas, I might not have had my interest kept completely until the end of a track. But by taking a minimalistic approach, 20 seconds at a time, now you're making a song that is incredibly dense, despite individually looking at each specific instance of your writing being simplistic. And I think that's an interesting way to go about writing music. Deceptively dense. Any individual section is not hyper complex, but the way that they're strung together and the fact that they are strung together, creating their dynamics, peaks, and values that they are peaks and values. The dynamic peaks and valleys that they do makes it seem very complicated. And it is still complicated, just not moment to moment. It's a bird's eye view type of complication. So that's fascinating. Aside from that, I don't know that I have much else to say about this. I certainly don't have an emotional read on it. It is just all over the place, and that can literally be just about anything. Uh, any sort of topic that you want to relate to chaos or whirlwinds or not really being able to know where your feet are. Uh, well, not able to know where the ground is, I think is what I wanted to say. Just any state of chaos or dizzyment. Um, I think the song represents well musically. It also has a high and low vibe to it, which we can even, I mean, we could even possibly extrapolate this out to um, a type of, how do I say this delicately? It could be a musical representation of bipolar disorder extrapolated out possibly to a type of extreme or representing a more extreme case of bipolar disorder. Despite the words manic and depressive, I don't think most people swing between opposites this wide of a spectrum. It's, if that is what they're going for, it would be a bit of hyperbole, a little exaggerated, but I mean, then we can also look at it as not just chaos, but duality, that we frequently jump between highs and lows, and what could that represent? Like, there's a lot of ways that I understand what they're achieving, but they don't quite, they're a bit vague in what these musical ideas are meant to portray. So I'm going to hit the lyrics here, we'll see what we can gather from that, and then we'll wrap this video up. So there is a bit of a pattern in here. There is a point probably around the 60% mark lyrically. I'm not sure where this is in the music, where we reiterate and return to a lot of the ideas we started with. I think they're mostly in the same order as well. Interestingly, it seems to be about, well, see, here's the thing. It could be about mental states. I might have been on the right path there with the bipolar thing. It says, spider webs on my steering wheel. Sometimes I'm barely alive. What else can you fuck up? So I let the eight-legged drive. Push too hard, you'll get pushed back. I still cringe at my reflection as I push everyone away. And I mean, right here we see somebody who's not in a great mental state. Um, they have a poor self-image. They tend to push people away, so they have, I don't want to say bad social skills, but they are self-destructive, possibly. I like the opening metaphor. Everything else seems to be pretty on the nose, but it says spider webs on my steering wheel, which I immediately went to a car. But I've hyper fixated on the word my steering wheel, and I wonder if that's your brain. Your brain is what steers your body, your thoughts, your emotions. It says sometimes I'm barely alive, so I don't use my brain too much, and sometimes I wonder if, I'm even alive. I think that's really interesting. So there's just an overall negative image of the self right here at the beginning, and we only lean into it further. What's the word? Well, my word is dirt to them. Nothing else I can say about it. A struggle is what you make it. Almost as if to say that this is all self created, right? And then we go into what I think is the chorus. We hear it a few times throughout the track. A struggle, if you want to call it that. Hate to burst that bubble, but it is. If you think for a second I'll shift my gears, then you're dead wrong. And this is interesting because it goes back to the steering wheel idea, which brings us back to who is in control of the body, how fast they're moving, what they're doing. It says, if you think I'll shift my gears, you're dead wrong. So if you think I'll change, this is who I am. I'm self-destructive. I have bad perception of myself. I'm going to push everyone away. And if you think that's going to change, it's not. And I think that's a really interesting angle to take this, because there is a recognition that this is not how things should be. This is a struggle. There's a line later on. It says, if you got an issue, I could duke it out, but sometimes I feel like this is done for clout. And I don't know if this is supposed to be this way, but I kind of get this notion. This whole song is, look how messed up I am, right? Things could be better. I'm not going to make them better. And that's just who I am, but I hate my life. And we end it This is actually the final line of the track. It is repeated elsewhere, but it is the final line. Sometimes I feel I do this for clout. And I get the feeling that it's referential to the song. I made a song about my mental state. I talked about how much I hate myself and how my life's not great. But is any of that true? If it is, why don't I get myself fixed? If I don't get help, is it because I just want to keep using this for pity? Do I think that it helps my art and my art helps me get my name out? Am I doing this for clout? And it makes me think about all of the songs about this topic. And I kind of hate that because there might be some truth to it, but I also think that it's really great that mental health is being talked about in music so often, oftentimes in mainstream songs. It's not usually given the depth it needs, but just having it out there in the conversation, I think, is really important given how recently it's been that mental health was barely brought up at all. It's very much a phenomenon in just my adult life that people take mental health seriously, despite people for decades, centuries dealing with it and just not having the means to talk about it or even know that they could, or if they wanted to be looked down upon for it. You know, it wasn't that long ago that the word shrink was frequently used for, negatively to talk about therapists, right? Um, when I say recently, I mean, geez, even like 5 years ago, I still hear people say it, not as much as often, usually an older crowd, but the idea of talking about mental health is very modern, and I'm glad that music is helping to push the normality of it, right? To make it seem more standard, just to go do it. It's no different than dental health or medical health or anything like that. But I think this does bring up an interesting point because as it becomes more popular to do, there will be people who do it for the popularity. And I don't know if they really meant for this to be extrapolated out towards the whole industry, but that's where I took that. And I kind of wonder if this song is supposed to be about that. If it is a personal song, or maybe it does both, is a song about the state of bandwagoning. What is it? Jumping on popular trends. I think for a lot of artists, like I said, it's going to be a personal thing, but it is a very popular topic, no different than romance in pop. And while it hasn't quite reached, I think, that critical moment where it feels like every song is about it, I do think that there are some people who might have made art about mental health when they themselves don't suffer from it or have mental health issues, um, but they're making art because it resonates with people and they find that that's a way to get their name out. I don't know, like I said, it's just that one line, but it's I don't know, it stands out for me. And then we have the duality of the music. Two meanings, two sides. I don't know, I might be grasping at straws there. Those are my thoughts on The Garden's A Struggle. What did you think? Let me know if you enjoyed it, anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on. Put that stuff down in the comments. Above the comments is a description box, and in there is a link for Linktree. Takes you to this place right here, has links for everything related to the channel. You can find my music, the Discord server, ways to support the channel, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. All right, we have a special selection today. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, to get confused again. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.